Why are European countries suddenly so uncomfortable? I've been thinking about this for a few weeks now. Because for years, Europe has spoken with absolute certainty about threats, about danger, about encroachment, about international order being turned upside down by Russia and China. And yet, the moment America starts using the same language in a way that affects Europe directly, everything becomes awkward. Everything becomes sensitive. Everyone suddenly wants to slow things down, talk about the process, consult a bit more. They talk about restraint. And that alone should tell us something very important. Because what America is doing with Greenland is not shocking. What is shocking is Europe's reaction to it, or more accurately, Europe's inability to respond clearly. For years, Europe and America together have promoted a very specific story about the world. A story where Russia is always advancing, always probing, always trying to destabilize the world. In that same story, China is quietly expanding its influence, surrounding Europe and America, positioning itself everywhere. This story has been repeated so often that it has stopped being questioned. We've all accepted it. It is treated as common sense. And now America is saying to the Europeans, Greenland matters. Greenland is strategic. Greenland could be vulnerable to Russia and China. Because Russia is active in the Arctic, China is interested. So therefore, America must be involved more deeply with the affairs of Greenland. And Europe does not know how to object. Because Europe helped write this script. Welcome to Ozi Perspective. On this channel, I take widely accepted global ideas, narratives, and assumptions, and I look at them differently. Because too many things are accepted simply because they have been repeated for a long time. So here the aim is to slow down, think clearly, and question ideas that are rarely questioned properly. Greenland is not just a territory between Europe and America. Greenland is a mirror that reflects back the contradictions of Western politics in a very uncomfortable way. America has always understood the importance of Greenland, so that's not new. American military presence has been there since the Second World War, so that's not new either. The strategic importance of Greenland is not new. What's new is the justification being used and how familiar that justification sounds. So it's security, stability, prevention, deterrence. We've heard these words before. Europe has used them, America has used them, they both use them together. So when America now says to the Europeans, we cannot leave Greenland exposed in a world where Russia and China are becoming more assertive, Europe is forced into an impossible position. Because if Europe agrees with America, it quietly accepts American dominance. And if Europe objects, it undermines years of its own rhetoric. This is a trap. This is a trap Europe has found itself in. Europe wants to talk about sovereignty now, about international law, about respecting boundaries. But these principles were never applied consistently in the first place. They never have. They were often applied selectively, usually in line with power, who has it, and who's exercising it at the time. So this is not unique to America. This is not unique to this moment. European history tells us a more complicated story. And as a historian, I find it very interesting. So let's take overseas territories. The United Kingdom controls Gibraltar, despite Spain's long-standing claims. But Gibraltar remains British, not because the legal case is flawless, but because Britain has the power, the strategic backing, and the ability to hold on to it. Or consider the Falkland Islands. Argentina claims it, Britain governs it. Why? Because when the dispute escalated between Britain and Argentina, Britain had the military capability to retake the islands and the capability to hold on to them. So this is not a moral assessment, it's a factual one. France offers us another example. French territories stretch across the Caribbean, the Indian Ocean, and the Pacific. Many of these territories were acquired in an era where the local population lacked the ability to resist a European power with superior force and reach. There are many other examples in Europe: the Netherlands, Spain, Portugal, even Denmark. So these European countries with historical control of distant territories have those territories not because international law demanded it, but because power allowed it. They had the power at the time. Even Greenland itself is not a fully independent actor, as people often pretend it is. Greenland's political and economic status is tied to Denmark, shaped by historical power arrangement. So not an abstract legal idea. So when Europe suddenly appeals to international law as a sacred shield, it rings hollow. Because international law has never consistently restrained powerful countries when their vital interests were at stake. It did not prevent wars. It did not stop takeover of territories or countries. It did not override strategic necessity. So now, look at the United States. America is not behaving unusually. It is behaving predictably. The United States is a superpower. And like most superpowers, they think first in strategic terms, not moral ones. So they evoke phrases like shipping routes, military positioning, resource access, rival containment, long-term leverage. Greenland sits at the intersection of all these. The Arctic is opening up, that's true, due to global warming. Rare earth materials are critical. Missile defense depends on geography, so we need a piece of land to station them. Great power competition is back. So when Washington looks at Greenland, it does not see a philosophical dilemma. It sees a vulnerability and takes advantage of it. Europe, meanwhile, is stuck in a contradiction of its own making. It wants America's protection through NATO, while also wanting independence when American priorities diverge. Some European commentators even suggest that if the US pushes too hard, NATO itself could be weakened or even collapse. But let's be honest, that's not going to happen. So when people suggest that Greenland could break NATO, I find it hard to believe. Because NATO survives because it is useful to the member state, not because it's pure. It survives contradictions all the time. It survives disagreements amongst member states. It survives competing national interests. It survives because the interests of member states overlap just enough to keep the alliance alive. So what's different now? It's definitely not NATO. What's different is Europe's position within the narrative. So for many years, Europe stood comfortably on their moral high ground, pointing outwards, criticizing others, lecturing countries around the world. But now Greenland shifts the angle of the mirror. Because now the logic once used against Russia and China is being applied internally. within the Western sphere itself. And Europe realizes something very uncomfortable. Europe realizes that once you normalize the idea that power must act preemptively, once you accept that security overrides sovereignty, once you repeat that narrative long enough, you cannot control where it is applied. So America is not betraying the rules-based order. America is operating exactly as it always has. The rules were never independent of power. They were always enforced by it. Europe's mistake was believing that aligning with power also meant ownership of the narrative. But Greenland shows that Europe was a partner in the storytelling, not the author. And this is why international law feels hollow to so many people around the world. Not because the law itself is meaningless, no, but because it is applied unevenly, always has. It speaks loudly to weak countries and softly to powerful ones. So when Europe invokes international law now, it sounds uncertain because the argument is wrong and the argument does not hold water because it's been used opportunistically for too long by the Europeans. And Greenland exposes that gap. The gap between what is said and what is done, between values and interests, between morality and power. And perhaps the most uncomfortable truth of all this is that Europe is not being marginalized by America. Europe is being confronted by its own silence over many years. Because when you help create a boogeyman, you cannot complain when someone else uses it more effectively than you. And that is why Greenland matters. Not because of the territory alone. Greenland is a beautiful country, full of smart, intelligent people. But Greenland also reveals something to the world. It reveals how international systems actually work. It strips off the slogans. It strips off the illusion. It removes the toggle of comfort. This is the conversation we need to have. If you found this perspective useful, or if it challenges the way you've been thinking about NATO and Greenland, or power politics more broadly, then take a moment to engage with it. Either way, the conversation does not end here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.